On New Year's Eve 2022, the number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs faced off with number 4 Ohio State in the semifinals of the college football playoffs. This was an incredibly entertaining game and was within one score for all but 8 of its 27 drives, but in the end, the Bulldogs won by 1 point, kicking the game-winning extra point with just 54 seconds on the clock. In any game, there are a lot of different ideas and concepts that go into producing a win, and that's especially true in the playoffs, where each of these teams had nearly a month to prepare for each other. In this game, though, Georgia had one strategy or idea that produced at least 150 yards and kept the chains moving with big plays on at least 4 scoring drives, and that was offensive coordinator Todd Monken's use of what I'll call tight end plus alignments. That's not a technical term, and it's just something that I came up with to describe a set of plays relevant to this video, but the basic idea is that on many plays, Georgia put a lot of pressure on the edges in the outside run game by loading up one side with a wing tight end, and then one other player who could also impact numbers in the run game. That other player could be a second tight end, it could be a wide receiver in a tight split, it could be someone motioning over from the other side of the formation, and so on, but the key is that they loaded up one edge with a wing tight end, plus at least one other person who could be a factor in outside runs. The basic idea of this strategy was to use the outside run to force the defense to load up with players on that edge, and then to use whatever the defense did to make that adjustment to open up the middle of the field in the intermediate and downfield passing game. As I've said, the strategy started with the outside run game and with Georgia's ability to stress the edge with one of these tight end plus alignments. To understand what those alignments bring to the table, let's start by looking at how Ohio State's lining up when they're not facing one of these formations. On defense, one of the biggest things that you'll typically want to do in the run game is to make sure that you have at least one more defender than the offense can block, and you want to make sure that that's true both in the box in general, as well as at any specific point of attack within it. For example, on this play, Georgia has 5 offensive linemen in the box, and so Ohio State's playing their base nickel front, which gives them 6 defenders in the box and lets them outnumber Georgia's blockers by 1. Now, I also said that Ohio State wants not just to outnumber Georgia's blockers in general, but also to outnumber them at every possible point of attack. There could be a lot of things to think about here in different formations, blocking schemes, and so on, but for now, let's just think of it in simple terms, looking at runs to the right of center versus runs to the left of center. Against this spread formation, we can think of the defense as having a 3-on-2 triangle at each of these points of attack. To each side of center, the Bulldogs have an offensive tackle and an offensive guard. And to each side of center, Ohio State's matching those 2 blockers with 2 defensive linemen and a linebacker, so no matter which side the offense runs to, Ohio State's going to have numbers. When Georgia brings a wing tight end into the equation, this is the kind of thing that they're trying to disrupt. On this play, for example, we see a tight end lined up to the left of center off the line of scrimmage, and the key detail here is that from this alignment, he can add in as an extra blocker to either side of center. Obviously, he could always stay to the left here, giving Georgia a third blocker to this side and letting them account for all 3 front players in Ohio State's 3-man triangle. Because he's off the line, though, he can also cross the formation, giving the Bulldogs a third blocker to that side. As we've seen, Ohio State's 6-man front gives them 3 box defenders to each side of the field. This tight end lets Georgia get a third blocker to one of those sides, taking away the Buckeyes' advantage, but before the snap, the defense doesn't know which side that's going to be, and this impacts their ability to get enough defenders at the real point of attack. One of Ohio State's solutions to this problem was to rotate their secondary toward that wing tight end and to run a coverage called 3 buzz. As the name suggests, this is a version of cover 3, so the cornerbacks and 1 safety are going to divide the deep field up into thirds. But what about the buzz tag? If we look at the bottom of the screen, we see that when the cornerback bails out to play his deep third down the sideline, the defense is going to need somebody to play underneath of him, taking away the short outside zone in the flat. The buzz tag is just telling us who that's going to be. Buzz starts with a B, and so it tells us that this backer will be responsible for that short outside zone. With that guy responsible for the flat, Ohio State's safety is then going to roll down to the inside of him, stacking about 3 yards behind the linebackers and preparing to defend a hook zone in the middle of the formation. This also benefits in the run game, where this alignment also gives Ohio State a 7th defender in the box. When Georgia brings in a wing tight end and adds him to their 5 offensive linemen, they have 6 blockers, and so this 3 buzz coverage gives the defense a 7th defender and lets them preserve their advantage against the run. But how's that safety actually going to decide where to go? As we've seen, Georgia's tight end can add in as an extra blocker to either side of the formation, and so Ohio State needs some way to make sure that that safety, who's their extra defender, is going to be in position to match him. To do this, they're asking that safety to read the flow of the backfield and to add in wherever he's needed. If the tight end stays where he is, then the safety can attack downhill, adding in as a 4th run defender to this side and letting Ohio State outnumber Georgia's blockers 4-on-3. On this play, though, the tight end's going to cross the formation. From his buzz position stacked behind the linebackers, the safety is able to read that backfield flow and fall back with him, where he becomes the fourth defender to that side instead. By using that safety as an adjuster to the tight end, Ohio State's kept their advantage at the point of attack, and the safety is able to fall in unblocked to make the tackle. This then was one of the structures that Georgia had to beat, and they had a variety of ways that they could do this, both with the run game and with play action passes. Here, for example, we see another formation where Georgia has that wing tight end lined up off the line of scrimmage. Like on the last play, Ohio State's running 3 buzz and bringing their short side safety down into the box to that side, giving them an extra defender over that tight end and using him to match him if he crosses the formation. To attack this assignment, Georgia's just going to target him in 2 different directions. First, they're going to hit him with that same kind of crossing action by the tight end, and as we saw in the last play, this is going to pull him inside and toward the line of scrimmage as if to defend the run. They're then going to take the wide receiver at the top of the screen and run him on a dig route, attacking over the middle into exactly the space that safety's vacating with his run responsibility. When the ball's snapped and the tight end starts to work across the formation, we see the safety falling back with him, opening up this space down the short side hash. The wide receiver's dig route then works over the middle and into that area, and the Bulldogs pick up a nice 22-yard gain on 2nd and 4. What I found really interesting, though, was how Georgia was able to attack that buzz safety's assignment in the run game. Here's another play with Georgia putting a wing tight end up at the top of the screen into the short side of the field, giving the Bulldogs 3 blockers to the right of center. Again, we've got Ohio State bringing a safety down into the box in 3 buzz, giving the Buckeyes a 4-on-3 advantage to this side. So from the defense's perspective, so far, so good. In spite of this, Georgia's going to run the ball to the right here, and they're going to get a huge gain out of it. So how are they actually doing this? This is where we see our first use of one of those tight end plus formations that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. First, Georgia's going to get rid of that buzz safety by bringing their wing tight end across the formation, making him the 3rd blocker to the left of center. The safety is responsible for matching that guy in the run game, and so when the tight end works across like this, the safety falls back with him to become the 4th defender to that side. Now, this movement by itself doesn't hurt the Buckeyes. Before the snap, they were 4-on-3 to the center's right, and when the tight end and safety cross the formation, that just turns into a 3-on-2, but they still have numbers at the point of attack. So how does Georgia get an advantage here? We'll take a look at this wide receiver lined up at the top of the screen and especially notice his split. He's lined up at the bottom of the numbers while the run blockers and defenders inside of him are just a little bit inside the numbers, and this puts him in great position to add in as that plus player in this tight end plus alignment. To take advantage of this, Georgia's going to have that guy crack back on Ohio State's linebacker, becoming a 3rd blocker to this side of the formation and allowing the Dogs to get ahead on all 3 of Ohio State's play side front defenders. When we switch over to the end zone angle, we see that Ohio State's playing with their nose tackle lined up inside of the right guard and their defensive end outside of the right tackle. That leaves him with a bubble or an open gap in between those 2 blockers, and that's the gap that the Buckeyes linebacker will be responsible for. After the snap, the right guard and right tackle are just going to block the defensive linemen that are lined up over them, opening up that gap in between them. So the right guard's going to block back on Ohio State's nose tackle, sealing him off to the inside. The right tackle can then kick out the defensive end, opening up a lane for the running back in between those 2 blocks. From this shot, we can also see why Ohio State wants their buzz safety to fall back to the left of center here. To the left, we see Georgia's tight end, who's crossed the formation to become an extra blocker to this side. Ohio State started the play with a 3-defender triangle to this side, and so the defensive end is going to play outside of the tight end's block. The linebacker is going to play inside of it, and the backside defensive tackle is going to defend the gap in between the left tackle and left guard. As we can see, though, that leaves a gap open inside of the left guard. When the Buckeye safety falls back to match the tight end to this side, then that's the gap that he needs to take away. And from this shot, we can really clearly see that if that safety weren't coming downhill here, then the running back would have the chance to get through that lane for a nice gain. To return to the play side then, we've already seen that Georgia's attacking the lane in between the right guard and the right tackle, and that Ohio State's linebacker right here is responsible for taking away that gap. Georgia's crack block by this wide receiver then is meant to take out that linebacker, allowing the running back to get outside and down the sideline for a 21-yard gain. If Ohio State wants to play 3 buzz, then these tight end plus alignments are going to be a real problem because basically Georgia's using their wing tight end to get rid of 1 defender, and then they're bringing in that plus blocker to gain an advantage. If Ohio State wants to stop this, then they need to make a call that gives them a permanent fourth defender to this side of the formation, and here they're going to do this with a coverage called 3 cloud. In 3 buzz, we saw that the buzz tag told us that a backer was going to be responsible for defending the shore outside zone in the flat. Well, in 3 cloud, that guy will instead be a cornerback. The safety then, instead of coming down into the box in that buzz alignment from the last few plays, is going to replace that cornerback as a deep outside third defender. Against the run, the key difference between Ohio State's 3 cloud and 3 buzz coverages is that if the wing tight end crosses the formation, the cloud cornerback will not follow him. He's a permanent edge player. When the wing tight end goes away, the Bulldogs have just 3 blockers to the right of center, and the cornerback gives Ohio State that fourth defender that they need to outnumber them. After the snap, this will force the running back to cut back into the middle of the line, where the Buckeyes are able to hold him to just a short gain. As we saw with 3 buzz, though, in 3 cloud, the Buckeyes are still vulnerable to the play-action passing game. Here we see Georgia with 2 tight ends up at the top of the screen, and like on the last play, Ohio State's running 3 cloud, with their cornerback walked up as a fourth defender on the edge, and the boundary safety dropping back to play a deep outside third. Georgia's going to get after this look with a pretty nice play-action fake. The offensive line's all going to slide to the left, making this look a lot like the zone plays into the boundary that Georgia likes to run. With the line sliding to the left, quarterback Stetson Bennett turns into the running back and shows the back of his jersey to the linebackers, causing them to pursue and step toward the line of scrimmage. They're then going to sneak one of their tight ends out behind those linebackers on a crossing route over the middle. After meshing with the running back, Bennett keeps the ball and rolls to the right, finding his tight end in the space that this run fake has created in the middle of the field. Ideally then, Ohio State would like to run a coverage that both gets them that cloud cornerback in the flat and also gives them answers against these play-action crossers, and one coverage that allowed them to do this was a Tampa II. Unlike the 3 deep coverages that we saw with 3 buzz and 3 cloud, the Tampa II is a split safety coverage where the field and boundary safeties divide the deep field in 2 halves, so you've got one safety playing over the top to each side of the field. When they do this, it does create a potential weakness down the middle of the field in between them. The thing that makes this coverage a Tampa II then, and not just a straightforward 2-deep coverage, is that this middle linebacker right here is going to drop into that intermediate hole where he's responsible for defending any middle run-through. In underneath coverage, because the Tampa II gives the defense a safety over the top to each side of the field, the cornerbacks do not have to be deep defenders, and so they're able to squat in the flat zones outside and underneath. If we look at the bottom of the screen where Georgia's showing a 2 tight end surface, this thing gives the defense that cloud cornerback that they wanted to fortify the edge against the run. The other thing that this does, though, is it gives the defense answers against crossing routes. To see why, we should talk about the alignment of this middle safety right here and about how his alignment changes in the Tampa II versus 3 cloud. In 3 cloud, the cornerback down at the bottom of the screen would be that permanent edge defender underneath, and then the secondary would roll toward him to create that 3-deep look. So the near safety would roll over the top to become a deep outside third defender to this side. The other deep safety would roll over to become the deep middle third defender. And the cornerback up at the top of the screen would drop out to become the deep outside third defender to that side. With the secondary rolled like this, though, there's nobody lined up over the slot receiver at the top of the screen, and so to deal with this in 3 cloud, the defense will need to pull a player out of the box to play over that receiver. From this position, assuming that the linebackers attack the run, there's nobody else giving them help against intermediate crossing routes, and as we've seen, this was a problem for Ohio State at different times in the game. In the Tampa II, though, this isn't as much of a problem. The Tampa II puts a safety over the top of that slot receiver, making him ready to take anything that might go downfield, and it also puts a cornerback outside of him, squatting in the flat in case he runs anything to the sideline. If we look back at that safety in the box, then we see that he only needs to defend inside breaking routes, and this is exactly why he's able to line up in the box in the first place. After the snap, he just needs to drop inside of that slot receiver because he's got the cornerback sitting outside, the safety bailing out to a deep half, and the middle linebacker picking up anything that might go down the middle. If we switch over and look at what the offense is doing here, we can see that Georgia's using this tight end down at the bottom of the screen to run a shallow cross. When we look at that middle safety's drop inside of the slot receiver, we see that this puts him in perfect position to pick up this route as it works across toward him. So those are some of the reasons that Ohio State might have wanted to get into the Tampa II, but unfortunately for them, the Dogs had a great passing game plan in place to shred it, and they ended up gaining almost 90 yards through the air against this coverage. Some of those plays were very workmanlike, as we'll see right here. Here, the Bulldogs are in a compressed set with 2 tight ends up at the top of the screen. Ohio State's running a slightly different take on the Tampa II here, this time with the middle safety dropping out to play as the intermediate hole dropper, while the middle linebacker will be the guy dropping inside of the slot receiver. As we saw when I introduced this coverage, one of the benefits of the Tampa II is that it allows that linebacker to play inside in the box because he knows he's got that deep half safety playing over the top and the cornerback playing to the outside. One downside, though, is that cornerback's going to be the only guy playing outside and underneath. Here, Georgia's just going to attack him by running out routes with both of their receivers, creating a 2-on-1 stretch on him. After the snap, we can see that the cornerback runs with the out by the receiver that he's lined up over. This then creates a void for the slot receiver inside of him, who's running an out against a linebacker that's dropping to the inside. On this play, we'll see a 2nd and 10, which is more of an obvious passing play, and Georgia's going with an empty backfield, so Ohio State doesn't have to worry about the run here, but they're still going to go with the Tampa II as their preferred coverage due to its benefits against the pass. So, after the snap, we're going to see the 2 safeties dropping back to play their deep halves, while the middle linebacker drops to defend the intermediate hole. What this does, though, is it creates a void underneath of that dropping linebacker and in between the middle safety and the weak side linebacker. To attack that space, Georgia's just going to take this tight end up at the top of the screen, and they're going to have him sit down directly over the ball right in the middle of all those drops. He catches the ball in space and is able to fight through contact to get close to a first down. Where the fireworks really started, though, was when Georgia started to attack that middle hole dropper deep down the middle of the field. If we go back to this play, we'll remember that the middle linebacker here was dropping to defend the middle run-through. Well, here, Georgia's going to attack him by running their slot receiver straight down the middle of the field. That's a 240-pound linebacker trying to cover a 185-pound receiver, and quarterback Stetson Bennett's going to take that matchup all day. Wide receiver Arian Smith beats his man over the top, he picks up a 47-yard gain, and Georgia scores their 2nd touchdown of the game just 1 play later. Now we know, though, that this was all set up by Georgia's tight end plus alignment on this play, and by the pressure that it puts on the defense to defend the edge in the outside run game, showing us the strategy underlying Monken's use of these formations.